patience. Our SIC meeting went slightly longer than we'd expected. I'm going to call this meeting. I hope you heard me anyway. I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience. This is Sonia. Lag time. We're back. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome for the third time. And thank you for your patience. Our SIC meeting went a little longer tonight. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. I will look to the Deputy Mayor for the motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that the content of the Council agenda for February the 11th, 2019 be adopted as amended to include Staff Report T 2019-01.
I will call the vote on that. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations tonight? Seeing none at this time, if you find yourself in that position as we get through the agenda, please notify us and state the general nature of the conflict. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor MacLeod.
Moved by Councillor MacLeod and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that the minutes of the council meeting held January 28th, 2019 be approved as presented.
Council, any questions or comments on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to community announcements, and I'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. One thing I would just bring to people's attention, this is coming from an article that was in the Simcoe.com paper written by John Edwards, and just in the spirit of reconciliation and the art that we have here in the gallery. It's Black History Month, and the Heritage Community Church, which is a long-standing, or has a long-standing proud history within the community, this month, and they're located on 7th Street. They are hosting an exhibition called Passage to Freedom this month. It's an exhibition that is on loan to them from the City of Welland, and it's available to the public for viewing Tuesday through Friday, 10 through 3 p.m. And we have a significant African-Canadian cultural component to our community, both Simcoe and Grey County. We're the ends of the line, so to speak, in Oro Medonte and the town, I guess now, City of Owen Sound. And we need to remember and cherish that history. And this is an exhibition, sorry, not an exhibition, but an exhibit that I would encourage people to take an opportunity to check out. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor MacLeod.
Just one community announcement, and that is that on Monday, Family Day, coming up at the end of this weekend, an eager phalanx of volunteers at the Collingwood Curling Club will be available to give you a taste of curling if that is something that you might be interested in. Free and fun, and it could be a lifetime sport for you and your family if you want to check it out on Family Day.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Well, to pick up on Councillor MacLeod, furthering on those wonderful family activity days coming up this Monday, thank you to Director Culver and his staff. The town of Collingwood has some great activities planned to keep you and your family active and having fun this family day. There are actually more than 20 different things to do, and they're all free. Come out to Central Park for skating, board games, open gym, curling, and crafts. You can also play some sledge hockey, shinny hockey, or try out some snowshoes. For the full schedule, you can visit collingwood.ca/front/family day. Thank you.
Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Just a happy reminder to any of my friends and people watching tonight that this Thursday is Valentine's Day. Do not mess up, do not forget. And there's lots of flower places around Collingwood and other such gifts. So shop Collingwood, and this Thursday, Valentine's Day.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Very important event coming up on February 23rd. That's the coldest night of the year. And that will be held coming out of Trinity United Church at 5 o'clock. And individuals or teams can walk for 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers, all in support of Home Horizons Barbara Wider House for Homeless Youth. And I have entered a Team Collingwood, and that would be not Team Collingwood Council, but Team Collingwood. And I see that some of you have already signed up, so you can sponsor us, or you can sponsor anyone you wish to sponsor for this very good cause by going to cnoy.org/location/Collingwood. And Kim, that's it for me.
Councilor Berman.
Nothing for me this week, thank you.
Councilor Hamlin.
Nothing for me this week.
Okay, I have 2 quick announcements. Just to congratulate Duntroon Highlands, which held the Eastern Canadian Championships in cross-country skiing from February 1st to February 3rd up at the facility in Duntroon. There was probably 450 athletes from across Canada. It was mainly Eastern Canada, but there were athletes from Canmore, BC, and as well from the States. It was 4 days of intensive work for the volunteers. There were 120 volunteers that contributed to this event, and they did our region proud, making exceptional use of the snow and battling the weather that has made their job difficult. But it was a spectacular event, and Councillor Doherty and I were out to hand out medals during the event, as was Mayor Measures from Clearview, and it was just a great day with ages from 8 to 60, I think, so it was quite a spectacular event. Secondly, just an announcement that this coming Wednesday, February 13th, there is a joint special council meeting between the Town of Collingwood Council and the Township of Clearview, and we will be reviewing our duty of care training for the Safe Water Drinking Act. So you will know that your council is certified in their responsibilities to making sure that you have healthy, safe drinking water under the legislation. That said, we will move on to the next item, which is the public meeting. Welcome to Collingwood's public meeting. The planning meeting. Members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal once staff have completed their review. Once the public portion of the meeting has been completed, no more public discussion will be allowed. Before closing, I will ask 3 times for further comments. I will then ask council members if they have any final questions for staff. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses, including postal code, of all individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you want to be notified of any future council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the interest party forms located at the table behind the podium, which is just on the wall below the paintings. Under the Planning Act, only those who have verbally expressed any comments or concerns here tonight, or have provided a written submission of any comments or concerns prior to council's enactment of the bylaw, have the right to appeal any decision of council to the local planning appeal tribunal. And if you do not make an oral submission this evening or a written submission to council before the bylaw is passed, you may not be added as a party to an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. This public hearing is being recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are also being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes will be available to the general public, including on the town's website. I will now ask the clerk to confirm that notification to the public has been given as required under the Planning Act.
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council and the public, I can confirm that notice has been provided for the proposed official plan and the zoning bylaw amendment being heard this evening, and it has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act and distributed on January the 17th, 2019.
Thank you. And Mr. Houghton, Ms. Farrar, who is going to be handling this from staff perspective?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It is Mr. Houghton.
Welcome, Trevor.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, members of council. We have a brief presentation for you today, at which point afterwards I'll pass it over to the applicant's agent, Mr. Colin Travis, who is here today with his team, and he can go over the more specifics. So my friend and I are going to be doing some eye contact, because I think I'm going to be relying on him to advance the slides, so we'll go for the next one. So this is a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. It's on the Georgian Bay Hotel and Conference Center. Town file is D084318. To get ourselves started, just a little bit of background information on the applicant. The applicant is Georgian Bay Hotel and the Conference Center. Again, the agent is Mr. Colin Travis, who's here today. The submission date was, the application was received on August the 14th of 2018. The municipal address of the property is 10 Vacation Drive, and the property is approximately 8.5 hectares. As alluded to by the clerk, this is a copy of the notice of public meeting that was advertised in accordance with the Act and also published in the Collingwood Connection on January the 17th. This is an aerial photo of the subject property outlined in red. You will note that there is a portion of the property, I'm going to call it the hole in the donut, which is Simcoe County Condo number 129. It is not part of this application with this submission today. With respect to the supporting studies and reports, we've received a planning justification report, a golf club analysis, a traffic opinion letter, a functional servicing and stormwater management report. We've also received a scoped environmental impact statement. One note on the EIS. The original application was circulated with the first version of the EIS. The proponent has since come back with an amended EIS based on comments and dialogue with the Conservation Authority. We just received that last Friday, and it's just been circulated to the Conservation Authority for comments. You'll see their comments saying that they haven't received the second update. They just literally got it last week. Also to note that there has been an application for site plan control agreement that just recently was submitted on the to the town for the southern sector, and literally just received on Wednesday, so it hasn't been circulated as of yet. Getting into the official plan designations, the property is currently designated resort commercial. And resort commercial permits hotels, motels, lodges, inns, conference centers, and retirement homes. In addition to that, you're also allowed accessory uses including retail, commercial, convenience stores, recreational facilities, restaurants, banquet facilities, and personal services. A portion of the subject lands is designated environmental protection, and that is a small portion of land that was an unused stormwater management pond, which we'll touch on here momentarily. In the EP designated areas, you're allowed conservation, flood control, wildlife management, public parks, utilities, pedestrian trails, and private and public roads. Sticking with the official plan, these lands are currently within what's called the town's inside built boundary. And inside the built boundary are those areas of the town that, as of June of 2006, development had for the most part either occurred or has typically been occurring. And as you may know, the growth plan and then the policies of our official plans state that by 2015, the town's minimum target is 40% of all of our development per year. We're trying to occur within that built boundary area. Current zoning of the property, it has two actually. The first one is a resort commercial exception 4, which is C3-4. And then there's small portions of the property that are environmental protection. The C3-4 zone permits the full range of those commercial uses that are allowed in the parent C3 zoning. The zoning exception recognizes that for the purposes of determining zoning conformity, this property will be considered one contiguous lot. As you may or may not know, there's a series of condominium corporations in what I'm going to be calling the central sector of the property. And what the zoning bylaw exception basically states is, regardless of where those interior lot lines are, setbacks and provisions of lot coverage, etc., we're going to be looking at this as one contiguous whole lot. And the EP zone, again, limits uses to conservation, flood control, environmental buffer areas, natural hazard, and natural heritage areas. Going back to describing the subject property, in the next portion of the presentation, and Mr. Travis will also speak to this, we're gonna be dividing the property into sectors. There's 3 sectors, the north sector, the central sector, and the south sector. So the official plan amendment is proposing to redesignate the central sector and the south sector. The central sector would be redesignated from resort commercial to a special exception of the resort commercial designation. That means that that area could be used for both short-term accommodation and or as residential dwelling units. Also, the unused stormwater management pond would be redesignated from environmental protection also to resort and commercial exception, and that area is proposed to be used for the construction of a detached accessory building that would be used for the hotel operation. The southern sector would be redesignated from its current designation of resort commercial to a high-density residential exception, and that would be where the development of the 185 residential apartment dwelling units would occur. The proposed zoning amendment would be threefold. One, the zoning amendment would rezone or have an exception to that zone for the northern sector to reduce an interior yard setback from 10 meters to nil to recognize the location of an existing admin building that is currently on site being used accessory to the hotel. The third portion would be the central sector would be rezoned from C3-4 to a C3 exception zone. That exception zone again would allow the short-term accommodation in addition to the residential dwelling units. Also, again, the unused stormwater management pond would be rezoned from its current EP zone, and a portion of it would be also zone C3 exception to allow for the construction of the detached accessory building that would be used for the operations of the hotel. And then lastly, the southern sector would be rezoned from the C3-4 zone to an R4 exception zone, and that exception zone again would be to permit that area to be used as the 185 residential apartment dwelling units. So what we have next is a summary of the correspondence that we've received from the external circulation from the County of Simcoe. The subject lands are designated settlement in the County of Simcoe official plan. The lands are located inside the delineated built boundary and are considered designated greenfield area. The county official plan states that Collingwood is to achieve 40% intensification target within its built boundary. The proposed development would contribute towards the town's target density. They also note that development is within the 120 meters of the provincially significant wetland. An EIS in support of the application was completed by Hensel Design Group, Inc. The county recommends that the EIS proposed refinements and the 10-meter buffer be confirmed by the Conservation Authority and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And lastly, the county will not be able to provide waste collection for this development, and based on the county's refined D4 assessment area, a D4 study was not required by the county for this development. Just before we go on to the next slide, I think what we need to just consider is that first comment where they said it was the designated greenfield area. I'm not sure that that's correct. I'm not sure if that's my typo or Ms. Thompson's typo, because it's definitely within inside the town's built boundary. It is not a greenfield area, but I will confirm that for council. The next comment we have is from the town's engineering services. Firstly, the safety nets that are proposed along the 10th fairway as outlined in the Gulf spray analysis are not the preferred solution by the town. But however, this can be analyzed further as part of the site plan approval process. Next, the sanitary servicing and downstream capacity is to be confirmed through the town's sanitary model. Thirdly, the town is not aware of any pre-treatment facilities for the existing roadside ditches, and we were not provided an analysis of the infiltration rate of the soil. Considering that the lands are discharging to a provincially significant wetland, we have concerns that the enhanced treatment of the stormwater is not being provided. And lastly, they recommend that any future development, the site plans and or building permits within the rezone portion of the property be required to submit a stormwater management implementation report with recommendations on upgrades to the deficient existing end-of-pipe stormwater facility. And lastly, the Conservation Authority. The property is within their regulatory jurisdiction. The NVCA has confirmed that the development is not located in an area of natural hazards. The NVCA did undertake an extensive consultation with the applicant's agent and consultants. The NVCA has requested additional amphibian and bird survey data to substantiate the justification for reduced setbacks from the PSW. To date, this information had yet to be received. Significant modifications to the existing water course, which is in a culvert right now, have been proposed in concept, including having it daylighted as an amenity feature. What that means, council, is there's a water course that traverses through the property that's actually buried in a culvert. The proponent proposes to take the culvert out, daylight or expose the stream, and then make that a part of an amenity area for the residents. Mr. Travis will show you a slide with that. While the NVCA would support daylighting the water course, the typical water course setbacks and naturalization requirements that are routinely required by the NVCA are not provided. And because of the above noted concern and gaps in the required data, the NVCA does not support the application at this time. Again, when I received this application, they had yet to receive the amended EIS, which they just received on Friday. And that concludes the town's presentation, and Mr. Travis is here for his presentation as well, Your Worship.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and members of council. You're the slide guy, all right. Again, a lot of information from Trevor, and my apologies if I'm duplicating some of that information. We try to make sure that we weren't duplicating, but I think we have a little bit. But with regards to the introduction, again, as Trevor noted, the owner being Georgian Bay Hotel, and one of the owners, Mr. Peter Lavoie, is in the audience tonight with us. Chief engineers are C.F. Crozier and Associates. Kevin Morris and Rebecca Alexander are also in the audience tonight. And leading the environmental team and design would be Mike Hensel of Hensel Design. Excuse me, and Mike is in the audience as well. As Trevor noted, the subject lands are on the south side of Highway 26. They have a frontage of approximately 161 meters. The overall depth is around 680 meters. The surrounding land uses to the north would be PSW. Also to the north would be the recently completed Wildwood Cove condominium. To the east would be an existing condominium corporation along with the vacant development land. Further to the east would be the nursery and the Pre River School. To the south and to the east would be the PSW, and again locally referred to as often as the Cranberry Marsh, and that would border for the most part the eastern boundary of the main subject lands. To the south would be the 11th hole of the Cranberry Golf Course, and to the west would be the 10th. My apologies for this one, because what I've done is I've rotated the orientation of the plan to the right, just to take advantage of the landscape feature of this slide. As noted before, we sort of divided the overall lands into three sectors or three neighborhoods, and this sort of reflects the historical development of the subject lands over the past 10 or 20 or 30 years. Now, the one that we're very familiar with would be the north sector, which is the existing hotel. As mentioned before, the central sector kind of reflects the historical development of condominiums, and the south sector is for the most part vacant, save and except a couple of outer buildings. Now, with the north sector, we're looking at, as I said, primarily the hotel. It is the hotel itself. 93 suites, some 235 parking spaces, a variety of amenities associated with the hotel, the tennis courts and swimming pools, a mini golf course. And if you look at that graphic, in the upper sort of left-hand part of the graphic would be the outer buildings associated with the administration functions of the hotel. Next one. Now, with that cluster of buildings I've just mentioned, the outer buildings, there is a building that was constructed quite a while ago, and it was constructed on the at the lot line. And this is one of those detailed aspects of the rezoning application itself, is to recognize the fact that this older building is existing and it is built on the lot line. And we're seeking to recognize that through a very specific part of the rezoning the rezoning itself. With the central sector, again, we're talking of the number of existing units now around 38, 34 are part of this application. The remnant pond area that no longer functions as a stormwater management pond and has no functions is in that green area at the bottom part of the graphic. And part of the, as I'll explain later on, part of the application is to, again, rezone that green area more into the commercial, resort commercial land use zoning and designation. So the south sector, from an existing use point of view, again, for the most part vacant. The two green spots that you see there are reflective of the PSW as identified in the official plan and zoning right now. And through the work of the scoped EIS, we've been able to further refine and define those. Now, on that graphic, I think you can see a faint 10-meter wide band along the bottom part of the east boundary. And that is proposed to be an EP zone, proposed to be zoned EP, and would be approximately in the neighborhood of some 2,600 square meters. Now, there was an existing green EP, as we have defined, is around 510 square meters. So we're adding more EP zoning as a result of this application. Next slide, please. Again, this graphic shows the more precise location of that 10-meter EP buffer additional zone and designation along the west boundary. Part of the EIS and the work that we're doing, the 10-meter wide EP boundary, we are proposing to enhance that through planting and and functional grading. So the idea through the planting is to certainly provide additional coverage, but also provide a cover that will deter, stop people from walking through it. So we're looking at all kinds of thorny-like plantings in that area. Again, that'll be subject to further review with the Conservation Authority, as well as a lot more detail at site plan stage. Now, with regards to the proposed zoning, as I said, when you look at this graphic, the one on the right-hand side reflects the existing hotel. So the intent is to retain that zoning, and with the proviso that we acknowledge that one outer building that sits on the property line, a smaller administration building. Now, in the central part, you'll see the lines going, the horizontal lines. That represents a proposed change in zoning, as noted before, to still retain a commercial resort zoning, but add as an additional permitted use residential. Now, the basis for this is that over decades, the existing condos in there were developed under residential zoning and under a residential official plan designation. When we updated the official plan and when we updated the comprehensive bylaw, we changed the designation to a resort commercial. We also changed the zoning to a resort commercial zoning on these lands that were, some of them were occupied as residential and some of them were being used as short-term accommodation. So the purpose is not to take away from that, but to add the residential as a permitted use, as some of those units are being used for residential, they're occupied as residential units. Now, in that central sector, on the bottom part, you'll see that there is a proposal to, as part of the rezoning process, to rezone that old pond area to a resort commercial use, a hotel-related use. And around on L-shaped configuration would be an additional 10-meter wide EP zone as a buffer. So we extend that, and it'll be, again, continue to be an EP. Now, in the south sector, again, the diagonal lines indicate our proposal to rezone those lands from commercial resort commercial to a residential zone to allow for the construction of apartment-type buildings. In addition, with this zoning schedule, we want to rationalize that EP zone along the east boundary, again within that 10-meter setback, and bring the zoning bylaw up to date with the latest findings from the updated EIS scope study. There is before I go any further, what I want to do is also emphasize that the application for the official plan amendment mirrors the changes that we're looking for in the zoning bylaw amendment. That is to recognize existing hotel as is and recognize the central sector to allow for, again, resort commercial plus the residential, and then allow for the residential in the south sector. Mr. Houghton's already gone through the range of uses. In the existing south sector would include hotels, motels, lodges, inns, conference center, and retirement homes. The proposed use of the south sector, we can now be more certain with the advent of a site plan application. The site plan application has been submitted on behalf of Brandy Lane Homes. Brandy Lane Homes, as the council will know, is the developer of Wildwood and Wildwood Cove. The information in that site plan application will tell us that we're proposing 168 units, and those units would be in a housing form similar to Wildwood Cove, 3.5 stories. As Mr. Houghton noted, that is subject to a detailed site plan review, and that was submitted last week. Again, I apologize for the quality of this. It's difficult to have the detailed site plan show clearly on this kind of venue, but in the south sector, we're looking at a central road going through the middle, 6 individual buildings, again 3.5 stories, with parking. It's a very similar arrangement that we find at Wildwood Cove and Wildwood. At the, let's say the far left side of this graphic, let's see the south side of the site, there will be an on-site amenity center, swimming pool, and recreational building. Going through the spine of this development will also be sidewalks on both sides of the condominium road. Next slide. The height, this is a cross section again, is typical of the Wildwood Cove. There's some slight changes to the architectural facades. Overall building height, as I said, about 13.2 meters or 3.5 stories, which is about 43 feet. And again, these will be subject to further detailed review as we go through site plan. Under engineering and environmental, we submitted a supplemental study report to the NVCA, a supplemental scoped EIS. That was to address additional questions that arose during their review of the first EIS. And as Mr. Houghton noted, that was received by the NVC last week, and certainly probably postdated the comments that we did receive from the NVCA. Through Croziers, we've confirmed the servicing capacity, and there is a TIS, a traffic impact study, that was submitted with this application that confirmed the adequacy of the existing routing system. And as I said, we're looking for looking forward to a review of the updated EIS with NVCA, and again, we'll be involving hopefully a meeting with the town and the NVC on that one. There was mention earlier on of basically a ditch that goes through the center of the existing site. It's taking water from the golf course lands through from the west to the site to the east. It's handled right now by a small 500 millimeter culvert. And part of the, again, detail through the site plan and the EIS is to enhance that as a feature on the site. So rather than having it culverted, to turn it into it still will carry the water that's required, but will be in a landscape and environmental feature. Again, that'll be detailed through the site plan review. Associated with this application was submission of a plan justification report, and we took into account the PPS, the growth plan, Simcoe County plan, and we heard the comments from Simcoe County planners, Collingwood official plan, all in part of the July 2018 submission. With regards to the concluding remarks, again, we want to recognize the existing uses. We want to introduce and change the use on the southern part to allow for residential. The comments, and again, as usual with the staff report that comes before council towards the end of this process, comments and concerns will be identified and addressed in that report. And with regards to the town engineering comments that were on the screen earlier on, I know that a lot of those comments will be further refined as we go through the actual site plan process itself. The purpose of the engineering submissions at the official plan and zoning bylaw stage was to identify at a broader level the appropriateness of the development, and that it can proceed given the fact that we do need to go through further details through site plan review and approval. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that with that, the meeting now goes over for public comment and questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll put out the first call to members of the audience that would like to speak to this proposal. Please come forward, sir.
James D.L., I live in the area. I just want to know if I could put some comments in writing. Is that acceptable?
Yes, you can. You can put comments in writing.
Well, while I'm up here, I just learned about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm wondering if it seems to be in a hurry-up mode, and I'm wondering if this is a normal process, whether we followed the usual steps.
Yes, I'll pass it over to Director Farrar from Planning to confirm the process we followed here.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Yes, this is a normal process. We are not approving anything this evening. In fact, it will be some time before we see anything approved. This is an opportunity to listen to the public and for public comments, but rest assured that there won't be a staff report or anything on an agenda for probably a couple of months, I would think, before we get all the matters worked out.
Okay, thank you. I'll put my comments in writing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dale. If you can just sign the sheet behind you there.
Yeah.
Put out a second call for comments from people in attendance tonight. Are there any comments on the proposal? Please come forward. I'll make the last call then. We get 3 tries. Last call then, come forward. This is it. All right, seeing no further comments then, I will ask council members if you have any questions or comments with respect to the presentation.
I do have some. I have a lot.
Councillor Hamlin.
Okay. I wonder who I should be addressing these questions to, Your Worship.
Put it to me and I'll look around and see who we should go to.
So I'm thinking perhaps it's Mr. Travis. Because I have a lot of questions.
Well,
I
maybe
don't
get us your
understand.
top questions and we can deal with it, either maybe arrange a meeting and Ms. Farrar if necessary,
No, I
but if
think
you put them on the record, we can have them out there.
Okay, so my first question is, with respect to the middle portion of the site, I don't understand what is there right now. I heard Mr. Ellis explain that the residential rezoning would be to, I would say, legalize existing uses. So my first question is, what is there now?
Ms. Farrar or Mr. Travis?
Certainly, I can answer that. These are buildings, and please, I'm not the expert on this site and I don't pretend to be. There's the project manager and then the planner for the site in the audience, so if they would rather answer this, I will certainly step aside. There are existing buildings that were originally built as residential townhouse units. It's my understanding that they aren't used as residential townhouse units. The majority of them are used as short-term accommodation because they are owned, frankly, from what I understand, by the hotel. So they function virtually like suites as part of the hotel. They are presently in a commercial zone, and we're going to be putting them in a zone that would not only recognize their commercial nature, but there's also, I believe, some residential in that vicinity as well. A couple of people are still owners and probably still occupying their units, but the majority of them would be used for short-term accommodation. And certainly, Mr. Houghton, or if I'm incorrect, please let me know. Okay.
You're correct.
Are there additional units planned for the central section?
Through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Hamlin, my answer is no, there are not. It's existing and it's staying in the current built form.
My next question on the central section is how many of the existing townhouse units are currently used for residential purposes as opposed to short-term accommodation?
Who best to answer that question? If you direct your questions to me, then I can direct them.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Your worship.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. I don't know exactly how many. We know that some are being used for residential uses.
How many are there in total then in that central section?
In that central, through you, Mr. Mayor, in that central section, there are 38 units in total. 34 are part of this application.
Okay, through you, your worship. My next question is the southerly section. I take it although it's being left in a commercial designation under the official plan, it's going to be rezoned for residential uses. Did I hear that right?
Ms. Farrar?
Through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Hamlin, no, it's my understanding that the southern port will be redesignated into a residential category, so that the official plan and zoning bylaw match.
Okay, thank you. And then through your worship, my next question would be, so we would be converting some commercial lands to residential lands. And I'm wondering whether we have any requirements for a justification for the loss of those commercial lands to residential, required of the applicant.
Director Farrar?
Thank you again, Mayor Saunderson, through you to Councillor Hamlin. I think we need to sort of experience or recognize the history of this site. These lands at the back, they started as residential. So they were residential, then they were converted to commercial, and now they're going back to residential. So originally, they started as being part of a residential condominium, and that's what we anticipated was going to be built there. It didn't happen. Then there was a request at our last official plan review to convert them to commercial. That never happened, and now it's going back to residential. I don't believe that we have any justification report other than our standard planning justification report, but I will leave that to perhaps one of the gentlemen who are the file managers.
To your worship, the justification report that we have, which was circulated to council from Mr. Travis, there is one. Did we ask him to justify going from resort commercial to residential? We have not. Typically, to speak to Ms. Fair, it is normal for us to ask for justifications when somebody is redesignated to a retail commercial of a certain size, but not the other way around.
Okay, through you, your worship, did I understand the presentation correctly that there was a stormwater pond area designated on the site, but the idea behind this proposal is to have the stormwater handled in the creek that's going to be opened up? I just didn't
Mr.
understand that.
Through your worship, there is a stormwater management pond that has been not being used, that is proposed to be redesignated and rezoned for the accessory detached building for the hotel site. The unearthed Creek undoubtedly may take some of the storm water from the southern sector. But the specifics on how the stormwater management report for the southern sector itself, I think I would rather defer that to Mr. Morse, who's in the audience here, and he can speak to that technicalities, because to be fair to you, I haven't read the actual stormwater management report, I just got it Wednesday.
Mr. Morris?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I think it's been alluded to the site plan application that's come forward, and that provides quite a bit more detail on the stormwater management strategy and the servicing strategy for the south sector. In simple terms, the ditch and culvert that runs through the sector right now is just a conveyance system. There is a large drainage area, let's call it to the west and the south, from the Cranberry Golf Course and south of the Georgian Trail. And basically all that water kind of collects and goes through and crosses through the south sector into the Cranberry Marsh. So what the intent is that daylighting and that channel will just act as a conveyance to allow the water to continue to flow across the south sector, but in a engineered managed system. Right now is not sufficiently sized or designed to accommodate that. So that hopefully answers the councilor's question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Through your worship, I have questions about how the internal road network's going to work on this site. And I'm wondering if someone could explain that to us.
Mr. Morris, upon that.
Yes, again, through your worship to Councillor Hamlin. I don't know if there's specific questions you have. When we've done this analysis, we worked with the fire department and engineering services and actually did a turning movement analysis through the site and to see if a fire truck could physically accessible throughout the development. And we were able to show that as there is only one single entrance now for physical cars. There is an agreement in place for emergency access to come through the site, but fire trucks can maneuver through the property. So that was done and completed. And it was part of this application, Trevor, I believe. There are drawings and figures that were done as part of that.
Through you, your worship, so there would just be one road in and out?
Yeah, we're maintaining the existing infrastructure and road network is being maintained, yes.
Through your worship, could you tell me, just point out where the development site is beside that lot that was referenced by Mr. Hutton? The development lot, not owned by your client, but the remnant parcel that we created recently by.
Yeah, I think I got that one.
Oh, is that the one to
You
the
got that
east?
one?
Sorry.
Okay.
Talking about the Pretty River Academy?
Yes, yeah.
So the Pretty River Academy parcel is right here.
And the development, through your worship, and the development piece?
Yeah, it's gonna be right in here. So that's Pretty River Lot 1, and then Pretty River Academy Lot 2 would be the school. So I think the parcel you're speaking to is right here.
So it abuts this parcel that's.
Not directly, because between this subject lands and the PRA lot number 1, there's a row of existing condominium right there. It's townhouses.
And through your worship at the south end, does it touch in any fashion?
It does not. The only portion that would touch would be right here on the southern sector. So the southern sector is right about here, and then the PSW lands that the town will be in ownership of would be right about here.
Right, thank you. So through your worship, is there, so, maybe I've answered my own question, but I'm wondering if there are potential to be designing these sites at the same time for maybe not roads, but stormwater servicing or other things we would think of if we were designing an area that's developing at the same time.
Certainly, through your worship, as Mr. Travis has alluded to, they are actually coming in to design their site plan for this property here. In terms of the PRA lot number 1, their stormwater facilities will be right here. It has an EP11 zone, which was developed through the Ontario Municipal Board when we did the EIS back in 2007. So they're gonna have their stormwater management, whoever they are, on the PRA Lot 2, which will be right in this quadrant right here.
So through you, your worship, so there would, since the stormwater pond's not built yet, would there be some potential to, if the site requires stormwater, could they be doing a joint facility?
Through your worship, that is a possibility. Right now, as from what I understand from Mr. Morris, the stormwater management pond that is proposed to be redesignated, which is that block right there, it's not required for this development. And then, of course, the PRA lot number 1 apparently will have its own facilities or ability. So we can ask Mr. Morris to weigh in on that. Come back with a response for council.
Okay, that would be appreciated.
Sorry, I have so many questions. Through you, Mr. Mayor, will there be a park dedication as part of the development proposal?
Through your worship, there will be a parkland dedication for the south sector when that land comes in for, well, has come in for site plan approval. It will be 5% of the value of the property, and it's likely to be a cash and lieu requirement.
Through you, your worship, I thought I had heard around this table recently that we weren't required, that we would be henceforth requiring land cash and lieu. Is this a change for this property?
Through your worship, my understanding is when we're looking at development applications for private condominiums, it's been the policy of council to require a cash in lieu as opposed to a land dedication, because if we take a land dedication, then the municipality is going to be left with trying to maintain and having access for the public to a publicly owned piece of property. I think in speaking to the Parks and Rec director this afternoon, the idea would be to take the cash in lieu and then use that money towards making improvements into the piece of property that we're going to be requiring from the Pretty River Academy.
Through you, your worship, for the middle sector that's going to be short-term or proposed to be short-term accommodation, is that a commercial assessment base that we'll be having there?
Through your worship, that land that is now designated in zone commercial, presumably the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, I have to assume, not being a member of them, would be looking at it from a commercial perspective. But I can check with my colleagues at Impact to confirm that for council.
Okay, thank you. I know the reason, through your worship, the reason I'm asking the question is I believe at the town of the Blue Mountains, they have actually an amendment to the legislation that allows commercial assessment for their short-term accommodation at the mountain. So I'd be interested in that answer.
Okay, good.
Those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
Any other questions around the table? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to the appropriate individual, just picking up on Councillor Hamlin's questioning with regards to traffic. I understand the red boundary is the boundary for the subject property that we're referring to, but from a traffic standpoint, it is somewhat misleading simply because the Whispering Woods condos, which are the properties on the eastern side, come in and out of the same property on Highway 26. And I'm assuming that they've been taken into account as it relates to the traffic traffic study. Thank you.
Certainly, through your worship, the traffic opinion letter that was prepared by Mr. Crozier's office did in fact look at to make sure that road going in, being Vacation Drive-In, not only could accommodate the existing development, but all the development that's being proposed as well. And as alluded to, there will be an access point on the Trafalgar Road side, which is actually the property, the Condo Corp to the east. They also have, to our fire chief, who raised that issue at pre-consultation, have confirmed that there's another emergency access out. So I can provide council with the traffic opinion letter from Mr. Crozier's office, but they've assured us that that infrastructure can facilitate the traffic. I'm not sure if there's improvements required on Highway 26 or not. I'm not sure if Mr. Morris says no.
Okay. The diagram that we're looking at is an older aerial photo. the sort of the J hook at the bottom, I take it that's Cranberry Trail, east or west, depending on where you are there. Was there any conversation or consideration to having an additional exit point for vehicle traffic or emergency vehicle traffic out the south end of the property?
Through your worship, that did come up at pre-consultation. I understand that the developer had spoken to the abutting property, which is Mr. Law, and they were unsuccessful in being able to negotiate that.
Maybe a final, well, I've got two questions. The property that we've just acquired to the east, the Cranberry Marsh, has there been any consultation with our own Trails Committee or Parks and Rec as to sort of the long-term plan for that property, and whether or not having a 3-story structure next door has any impact?
I'll answer, through your worship, I'll answer the last question first. So the EIS will actually determine whether or not there will be any impact from the residential development on what will be, but isn't yet, your PSW lands. Hence why Mr. Travis was speaking about the 10-meter buffer. And the Conservation Authority will tell us if the 10-meter buffer is sufficient or not sufficient. So we have to close that loop, which we haven't been able to do yet. As respect to the Trails Committee and what the long-term goals are, I'm going to have to defer that to my colleague,
Mr. Culver.
Thank you, through your worship. No, we haven't been consulting with the Trails Committee at this time, but definitely will going forward.
And then my last question, I've got a vested interest in this, and that is that I'm a left-handed golfer. So I'm concerned about the spray going off the 10th tee block there. But joking aside, if the development was there and the golf course was proposed after the fact, would that 10th fairway be permitted?
Through your worship, you raise an interesting point that we also have raised with the applicant. I'll take you back to the comments from the engineering department. There is right now, we believe, the requirement for some pretty significant fencing along, I hate to do this to you, council, but right along in this area right here, where people like me who don't golf at all would probably perhaps hit somebody who is enjoying their balcony. So that is something that is going to have to be resolved, and that will be resolved, I think, with not only staff and the applicant, but also the operator of the golf course. So I don't have an answer for you as of this moment. It is a concern, and it's something that we're going to have to address before it comes back to council. It can be addressed in a number of ways. The fencing or the screening, which is not preferred. The other thing that we might be able to do is put a holding zone on that portion, on that block, or that apartment building that's affected. Let the developer build the other 5 until we can get the golf course sorted out, and that holding zone would stay on that 6 apartment block until that's been resolved, so they can't get a building permit. So we're not going to try to hold up anybody, which is not our intent, but safety is something that we need to address, and that's going to be on the applicant to figure that out with the operator.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? I have one question to Trevor. You mentioned that the county has declined, cannot serve the waste disposal there, and we've had this issue rise up with another couple of other condo units down that neck of the woods, and it's become a problem that we've had to work patchwork after the fact. What are the plans, or would it be addressed in site plan to make sure that waste management does not become an issue?
Through your worship, you're absolutely correct. The county has gone on record saying there will not be garbage pickup. So it's not surprising. I think that was a comment that we received at pre-consultation. So the applicant is going to have to address their own internal garbage situation. I haven't looked at their site plan yet. I would presume that that will be a series of garbage depot areas. Whether they're entirely above ground and fenced in, or if they're the Morlock system where they're partially concealed underground, I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if Mr. Travis would care to weigh in on that one for you.
Mr. Mayor, with regards to the garbage, we are distributing the Moloch system throughout the site. So there'll be the partially buried circular bin systems that actually we see them in some locations in Collingwood right now. So that would be our approach.
Okay, thank you.
I have, sorry, through your worship, I just have one process question.
One question.
Yes,
We'll
one,
let you
just
go.
one, I'm sorry.
All right.
I recognize we're at a relatively preliminary stage of, this proposal. Would we anticipate another public meeting so that the public would have a chance to come back and look at this in its next reiteration?
I'll pass it on to Director Farrar.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. We wouldn't normally have a second public meeting. It's not suggesting that we could not have a second public meeting, but it would not be our standard practice. We would be more than happy to deal with any questions that do arise based on the proposal before us. But it doesn't appear that there's a great deal of public interest at this point. But if there is a desire around the council table for us to have a second public meeting, we will certainly do so.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that does it for that item, and appreciate everyone's patience in letting us drag our SIC meeting on a little longer. For those that are involved in this particular item, don't feel obligated to stay, although the rest of the meeting should be equally exciting. I'll look for the consent agenda. Who would have that?
That would be, your worship.
Okay, Councillor Tony.
Thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that the consent agenda, having been given due consideration by council, be received. And those are items 8.1 through 8.2.
So I'll call the vote. Now I'll ask if anyone wants to pull an item. So first, calling the vote on this. All in favor? It is carried unanimously. Are there any items that people would like to have pulled tonight? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and this would just be in regard to the second item from the Ministry of Transportation. And just a comment that I have had over the past couple of years, a number of comments about the speed of traffic along Beechwood, and so I know that residents will receive that information with gladness.
Good. Thank you. Reports and minutes of other committees, we have none. Staff reports, we are adding item T 2019-001, the proceeds from the recent sales. And Ms. Leonard, are you taking us through this report? Okay, I'll hand it over to you then.
Thank you, Worship. This is a quick report, and we're just going through, we're still not fully finished calculations on the amount of funding that we're going to have. So what we're doing is estimating that the total proceeds available will be about $15 million. And the suggestions that we're going to bring forward tonight have been developed by staff, and they're only a starting point for council and public input. And while we were developing them, we kept in mind the goals of the community-based strategic plan and the strategic financial plan. And all or part of the funds could be used for any one of the options that we're putting forth here. And we're always willing to hear more choices, more options where things might go. The first, as again I said, keeping in line with the community-based strategic plan, is debt management. Where we're sitting right now is that the external debenture debt cannot be repaid without significant penalties at this time. There are a lot of the debentures as well that are coming due in 2021, so it may work itself out over that period of time. But there are several categories of debt that can be repaid. We can repay the outstanding internal debt of 1.4 million. We do have committed debt of almost another 1.4 million, and those have been and will be detailed in the update on our debt report that is coming forward as well. And there is one existing unfunded project on our capital books, and that's related to the High Street widening project, which began in 2008, and we put it on hold in 2012 because development was going in other directions, and now that's coming back to the forefront again. Potential project funding. We've taken a look at it, and there is, as we did have a report on the terminals, it's approximately $10 million for a full renovation and revitalization on the terminal building. A next option would be to extend the services to the spit. At this point in time, one of the major challenges for the future of the terminals is the lack of the adequate water, electricity, and there's no sewer services extending out there. So allocating some of the funds for a project such as this would allow for the advancement of the waterfront master plan, components of the pier program. We thought of seeking a property in the proximity of the downtown core and/or waterfront area. We don't have an idea of how much that would be, but we would seek out a development partner as well that would assist with property itself and provide again another element of green space in the downtown, which at this point in time we don't have any, and would also public access to the waterfront area. Another item is that we've heard from the CAO tonight that accommodations are going to be somewhat tight for the staff, and as well we had an accommodation study completed. Phase 1 of that study was to rebuild the public works or renovate and expand the public works shop area to handle those staff members out there. That one we do have an estimated cost of $2.3 million. We could establish an internal loan fund, which is, again, this is a continuation of the debt management, long-term financial planning strategy that we could adopt, that we have adopted. The premise is that a fund is established to lend money to ourselves and repay ourselves over time. That would allow us to reduce or eliminate the need for future debenture funding, and it would create a perpetual fund to fund future capital projects. A lot of the universities and hospitals use their endowment funds in this manner to facilitate their capital projects that don't get grant funding and that type of thing. Reserves. The last council, there was a motion to consider the creation of a hospital reserve fund to assist with the, although it's 8 to 10 years away, but with the building of a new hospital in the community. We could use some funds to create a reserve of that nature. The Working Capital Reserve Fund. This is an essential component of our fiscal and stability and flexibility, and it's a critical element in our long-term planning. And it has been used and is being used to fund the expenses of the judicial inquiry. There's no estimate of the cost of the inquiry at this time. However, the fund will be severely depleted. The initial amount in that fund before the judicial inquiry was $2.5 million, and it was kind of a rainy day fund or a disaster fund, but it could use some topping up out of this. Again, the Waterfront Master Plan Reserve Fund, we could top that up. We have used some of the funds for the Awen Center this year, and the director is continuing to seek out as many and all granting opportunities that he can, but in most cases it's a one-third contribution plan to that. So we need to make sure that we have our 1/3 available to take advantage of any of the funding that Director Culver finds. The Life Cycle Replacement Reserve Fund top-up. This is the funding mechanism for our asset management plan. What we have currently been able to estimate is that there is an infrastructure deficit in approximately the $9 million range. And things are changing in the asset management world slightly, maybe more than slightly. But we have to be able to prove to developers in terms of the development charge background study that these assets that we're putting into our development charge studies can be sustainable through the asset management plans, and as well for the provincial government for funding for all of those types of things. We do need to have life cycle reserves, so some of the funds could be used for those purposes. And then the legacy funds, we believe that these funds could provide an opportunity to create something that the current and future generations of Collingwood residents will receive benefit from. First came to mind was seed funding for a community foundation. Community foundations are independent registered philanthropic institutions serving a geographically defined area, typically a city or an administrative area. We have the Huronia Community Fund, we have the Brockville Community Fund, Oakville Community Fund, Ottawa, and it's a fund that champions what matters most by directing grants, expertise, leadership, and other investments towards everything from shelter, education, and care for those in need, to the arts, environment, and recreation. And it's all directed by community members, community boards of directors. And by providing the seed funding, it would give them the opportunity then to organize and go out and seek additional donations from the corporate and individual sector in the community. And then finally, we could create a Collingwood Legacy Fund with some of the money that's there, and go out and seek some professional investment advice, get the best rates, have someone manage the money to ensure that we're preserving the principal. The annual interest could be used, or I'm saying interest, but investment income could be used for a specific annual project, or it could be accumulated to save up for a bigger project in the future. And those are the ideas that staff have come up with, and we're more than willing to listen to anything that council has to offer, and if we can get direction about public consultation, then these are the ideas that we will start with and see where it leads.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marjorie. Now we're going to receive this report tonight, and before I put the motion out, I will ask, because this was initially on our SIC agenda, if there's any member of the audience that would like to come and speak to this report and give us their thoughts and input. Seeing none, and then I'll look for a motion from council to receive the report and put it on the agenda for the next council meeting. Councillor Comey moving, Councillor Doherty seconding. Any comments or questions, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's passed unanimously. Motions tonight. There are no motions on the agenda, so we will go to bylaws. 12.1, appointments to boards and committees. Who would have that?
I do, Member Saunderson.
Councillor Madigan.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that council hereby enacts and passes the following bylaws for the appointment of members to various boards and committees. Bylaw number 2019-009, a bylaw to appoint members to the Collingwood Public Libraries Board. Bylaw number 2019-010, a bylaw to appoint members to the Committee of Adjustment Property Standards Appeal Committee. And bylaw number 2019-011, a bylaw to appoint members to the Collingwood Police Services Board.
Good, thank you. Any comments or questions, council? Councillor Mack.
I think it's pretty straightforward, but I would ask for a recorded vote to show the people that have put their names forward that this council wholeheartedly supports them moving forward with their dedication to our town.
Seeing that, unless there's any other comments, I will pass it over to the clerk.
Certainly, all those in favor of the appointment bylaws, please rise. Thank you, may be seated. Carried.
Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, county report, do you want to move that to the next meeting? Or, okay, we will defer the county report to next meeting. Old or deferred business. Any old or deferred business? Seeing none, any other business? Deputy Mayor.
Through you to perhaps Director McDonald. And I apologize, I had asked the question, not of staff, but a member of the public, and I was told that it actually had been looked after, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But Lockhart Road, when you're driving east toward Huron, Ontario, between the hours of say 8 and 9:30, and then 3 and 4:30, the backlog on some mornings is back as far as Brock. And the request was whether there could be an advanced green put in for that duration of time, just to flush out the traffic, so to speak.
Director McDonald.
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor, we've looked at that particular intersection and had a traffic analysis done of it. We've optimized the light as best we can at this point in time. And we have included as part of our 2019 budget turning lanes, and once turning lanes are in, then we can provide advanced turns. Without the turning lanes, it's difficult to put in advanced turning, permit advanced turning.
Maybe just a follow as a point of interest, that the turning lane, I guess, on Lockhart, is that independent of future development of that corner lot? Are they two separate issues?
They're two separate issues. Okay. The work will be within the municipal right-of-way, and it'll be both on Lockhart as well as Campbell on the opposite side as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other business? I have two items. First, I can advise council that last Thursday, February 7th, there was a Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative Board of Directors meetings. I have assumed former Mayor Cooper's place on the board, and it's certainly, I think, a very important initiative that was established under former Mayor Geddes with Mayor Miller and Mayor Daly from Chicago, and it involves can involve all cities and municipalities that are located on Great Lakes shorelines. And one of the issues that is coming to light is that the plastics problem in freshwater is as bad and potentially worse than what it is in the oceans, and we all know it's very bad in the ocean. So zero plastics waste strategy is something that's very much on the horizon, and we may look at our own council on the passing bylaws restricting use of bottled water in municipal buildings and providing nice clean water taps for our residents to refill their bottles. The other item I have on my list is that with the announcement of the provincial regional government review, Mr. Sealing and Fenn are conducting interviews at Simcoe County for county and all mayors of the 16 municipalities, and as we know, Simcoe County is one of the two counties that will come under this assessment, and there could be very far-reaching implications for us from municipal governance, municipal decision-making and service delivery, as well as potential upsizing or amalgamation. So I will be meeting with them on February 19th, 2019. If people, council members, have comments that they would like me to relay on this topic, then I would ask that you please get them to me by Monday noon. No other business. Before, we have the motion to go in camera. And who would have that?
I have that, your worship.
Councilor Doherty.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Comey. I think there's something missing here. Be it resolved that this council proceed in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of lands by the municipality or local board, and the item for discussion is sale of the Collingwood Regional Airport.
Okay. Want me to read in the preamble? Okay, so whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and the item for discussion is the sale of the Collingwood Regional Airport. Are there questions or comments before I call a vote? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. That will end our Rogers coverage for tonight. There may well be a Horizon report at the end of this in-camera session, and we will be live streaming that report. So if you are unable, you want to head home and you're not able to stay around to watch us rise and report, you can certainly catch it on the live stream through the municipal website. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night.